Testify welcomes you to the Book of Colossians. Let's begin. Paul addresses this letter to the church in Colossae, who he had never met in person. This church was not started by him, but by a co-worker Epaphras who lived in Colossae. Epaphras had visited Paul in prison and given him an update on the church in Colossae. The church there was experiencing cultural issues, which were tempting them to turn away from Jesus. Paul wrote this letter to encourage the Colossians, address the issues Epaphras had raised, and challenge them to a greater devotion to Jesus. The letter opens with two prayers. Paul first thanks God for what he learned from Epaphras, that the Colossians have been totally faithful to Jesus, and showing love for God and their neighbors. He moves on to pray that they will grow in their wisdom and understanding about Jesus. It's in Jesus the Messiah that we discover the author and king of creation, as well as the one who will bring about the new creation. He's the head of a new body, which refers to Jesus' people, who are the new humanity of believers both, Jew and Gentile, who believe in his resurrection. Paul then shows how the truth of the gospel transforms his own experience of suffering in prison. While he's being punished for announcing Jesus as the risen Lord and King to the Greek and Roman world, his suffering is not a defeat. It's actually Paul's way of participating in Jesus' own suffering, which was also done as an act of love. Paul's hardships are a cause for joy, as he has been imprisoned for spreading the surprising news about Israel's resurrected Messiah. Paul then addresses the cultural pressures that are tempting the Colossians to turn away from Jesus. They were being confronted by pressure to observe the laws of the Torah. All of these new Christians had grown up, worshipping the various Greek and Roman gods, who governed different arenas of everyday life. And some of the Colossian Christians considered Jesus as just one more deity that they could worship alongside the others. On the other side, a different cultural group, the Jewish Christians, were pressuring these non-Jews to complete their commitment to the Messiah by following all the laws found in the Torah. Paul specifically mentions the pressures of eating a kosher diet, observing sacred days, and circumcision. Paul says, to give in to these temptations, is an unacceptable compromise, and a failure to grasp who Jesus is and what he accomplished on their behalf. But Jesus has triumphed over these powers through his death and resurrection, freeing the Colossians from any former obligation to these powers. What Jesus did through his life, death, and resurrection lacks nothing and doesn't need to be supplemented by following the old laws. Paul describes their old humanity, which was characterized by distorted sexuality and destructive speech, and encourages them to live in the present. For Christians, that old humanity died along with Jesus and is replaced with his new humanity, characterized by mercy, generosity, forgiveness, and love. In Paul's words, the new humanity creates a people in which no one is Greek or Jewish, circumcised or uncircumcised, slave or free. But the Messiah is all, and is in all people. Paul advises on family relations and fellow workers, how wives should be subject to their husbands and how husbands should love their wives. Children should be obedient to their parents, and parents should not provoke or insult their children. Slaves should obey their masters, and masters should treat their slaves with justice and fairness. Above all, devote yourselves in prayer and conduct yourselves with wisdom. I hope that this Bible study has given you a broader overview of the Book of Colossians. Thank you for listening and learning. Stay blessed.